I received a call recently asking if I would support a man, John Gibbs, endorsed by Dr. Ben Carson in his candidacy for Congress. First, let me share that Dr. Carson was endorsing in his personal capacity, as is the right of every American. His views are his own and in no way reflective of any organization he may represent. But when I hear that a great American, such as Dr. Carson, is supporting a candidate for Congress, I'm intrigued for sure. I looked him up and found that John Gibbs is also endorsed by President Trump. He has a technology background, having worked at Apple right as they developed the first iPhone. He speaks fluent Japanese. He served as a Christian missionary to Japan, and he was the Assistant Secretary of HUD under Dr. Carson. He's visiting the Economic War Room today, and I can say that I see why Dr. Carson's endorsed him. But even better, we have Dr. Carson in person with him. Welcome to you both.
Well, thank you. It's so nice to be with you again, and so good to be with you, John. John was a lifesaver at HUD because, in any big federal agency, there are shifts and things that occur. And sometimes they leave a pretty big hole. And John was what we call the utility player. Whenever a hole occurred, he could fill it. He was just that good. He was very smart, could become an expert in a week on just about anything. And that's hard for me to say because I'm a Yaley and he went to Harvard, but it really does make a difference. And this is exactly the kind of individual that we need in Congress right now. We need people who are thinking people, not people who are ideologues, but people who can analyze the issues, analyze the facts, look at the data, and make important decisions. A lot of the trouble that we've gotten into recently is because we don't have people who think. We just people who blindly follow the leader. And that's not good for our country. That's not the way our system was designed. And I think John will make a big difference. Thinking about what are the things that affect the people? What are the people concerned about? They're concerned about inflation, gas prices, their food bill. They're concerned about the crime and the drugs and the trafficking, and all of these things that are happening to our country. And, we have people who just, that's not really a problem. The border is actually really sealed. There's no problem there. I mean, it's like they're saying to people, don't believe your eyes and your ears or your heart. Just listen to us. We'll tell you what you're supposed to think. But surprise, surprise, the American people are smarter than that. And I just don't think it's going to work.
Yeah. Well, John, how did you get here? You worked for Dr. Carson, but you've got all this other history. How did you get to be a leading contender for Congress, the future congressman from Grand Rapids?
Sure. Well, thanks, Kevin, for having me on, and thank you, Dr. Carson, for those great words. It was absolutely wonderful. There's no words to describe what it was like working for you, sir. And there's so many people in D.C. who are there for their own agenda or all kinds of other stuff, but Dr. Carson is someone who really cares about the country and has basic American common sense. So I just really thankful that I have had the chance to work with you, sir. So thank you. Well, I try to do the Alvin and the Chipmunks version, but I was born and raised in Michigan, of course. And after high school, I left and went out to do my undergrad in California. I was a computer geek, so I knew I wanted to do computer science. So I majored in computer science at Stanford. I also studied Japanese on the side while at Stanford. And after graduation, I stayed out there in Silicon Valley and worked as a software engineer at several different companies in Silicon Valley. I started at a small cybersecurity startup first. We got acquired by Symantec, became part of Symantec. After a while of doing that, I went to work for Palm, if you remember the Palm Pilot.
I do. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I worked on the Palm Trio, the smartphone version of that. So did that for a few years, and then I heard a rumor that Apple was going to make a phone. And this is before the iPhone had come out. And so I said, that's intriguing, let me check it out. So I went to their website. Sure enough, they were recruiting. Threw in my application, and because I was already a phone engineer at the time, I guess it was a good match, and I got the offer. And so I went to work for Apple on the very first version of the iPhone before it came out. And so I was writing software to test the functionality of the iPhone. Really enjoyed that opportunity. It was great to work under Steve Jobs there. But then at the church I was going to at the time, there was a class on world missions. And I said, I'm hooked, I got to do this. I already spoke Japanese, having studied that in college. Right. and having studied abroad there in college. And Japan is less than 1% Christian, the least Christian country in the world. So I said, there's a great need there. I've got to go there and be a part of this. So ended up applying with the mission I went with, and you raise all your own money and go around to all the churches and ask them to support you. And God provided that, and went over to Japan for several years as a missionary over there, doing many different ministries, outreach to men, homeless ministries, etc.
Those are two amazing careers already, and you're still a very young man at this point.
I guess so, yes. So after doing that for a few years, and this is when Mr. Obama was president, I said, wow, we've got trouble. The guy at the top in our country is really taking things downhill. I better learn how to get involved in this public policy stuff so I can make a difference there and switch my mission field, as it were. So I ended up leaving Japan as a missionary and going over to the Harvard Kennedy School, getting my master in public administration over there, which I really enjoyed, even though it's so far left over there. It'd make Obama look like Reagan almost.
Wow.
But I enjoyed it. I had fun mixing it up with people and talking with the students and sharing the viewpoint that they don't get to hear very often, just basic American common sense. So I really enjoyed that opportunity. Through that, I met a friend who was working for Dr. Carson, and we hit it off, and I said, do you think we can try to get me in administration or something? So we got the process going, and I began in our administration under Dr. Carson at HUD. In May of 2017, and I was there until the very end. And wonderful experience. There's fighting for what's right, basic common sense. Families. Dr. Carson always talked about families. Children raised to married two-parent homes have the best outcomes, whether it comes to crime, performance in school, or anything else. And the Success Sequence, get married, graduate high school, get married, and have kids after you get married. You follow that sequence, you have less than a 2% chance of becoming poor. I really love that Dr. Carson focused on that and wanted to have that reflected in all of our policies, because so few people will actually have the courage to step up and do that. So.
And it was interesting that, John came in 2017 and immediately became a superstar because he was so good at writing policy and putting things down in a logical sequence, and everybody recognized that. So. It was a great contribution that you made to your country.